The year was 1518, the Place Strasbourg, a bustling city in what is now France. Life was about to take a bizarre turn for its inhabitants. It all began with a woman named Frau Troffea. She stepped into the street, a strange look in her eyes. Then she began to dance. There was no music, no apparent reason, yet she danced on, her movements becoming increasingly erratic. Days passed, and Frau Troffea didn't stop. She danced through the day and into the night, her face contorted with a mixture of anguish and ecstasy. People gathered, a mixture of amusement and concern etched on their faces. What was wrong with this woman? Was it some strange possession, a divine curse? No one had answers, least of all Frau Troffea herself. Her body moved with a will of its own, trapped in a relentless, agonizing dance marathon. The townsfolk, initially dismissive, began to worry. Frau Troffea's strange affliction became a morbid curiosity. Her relentless movements, the bizarre expressions on her face, all whispered of something deeply unsettling. Little did they know this was just the beginning. Frau Troffea's solitary dance was the first ominous beat in a macabre symphony about to engulf the entire city. The music of madness was about to begin, and soon everyone would be forced to dance. As the days turned into a week, Frau Troffea's solitary dance began to attract followers. What started as a curious spectacle soon became a magnet for the townsfolk who gathered to watch her every move. One by one, others in Strasbourg started to experience the same inexplicable urge to dance. It was as if an invisible force had taken hold of their bodies, compelling them to join in the strange ritual. It seemed contagious, spreading like wildfire through the narrow, winding streets of the city. The more people danced, the more others felt the irresistible pull to join in, creating a chain reaction that no one could stop. Within a week, over 30 people had joined Frau Troffea's bizarre dance. The numbers grew daily, and soon the entire town was caught up in the frenzy. Their bodies contorted in similar uncontrolled movements. Arms flailed, legs kicked, and heads bobbed in a grotesque parody of joy. The once peaceful streets were now filled with a cacophony of shuffling feet, heavy breathing, and the occasional delirious laughter. The air was thick with the sound of bodies moving in unison, a symphony of chaos. The initial amusement had turned into fear. What was once a source of entertainment became a nightmarish reality that no one could escape. The sight of their neighbors, friends, and even family members succumbing to this strange affliction was terrifying. People watched in horror as those they loved were transformed into mindless dancers. What had started as a peculiar incident was quickly escalating into a full-blown crisis. The town's resources were stretched thin as more and more people fell victim to the dance. The streets were no longer a place of commerce and social interaction, but a stage for a macabre, involuntary ballet. Shops closed, markets were abandoned, and the town square became a dance floor. The line between spectator and participant became increasingly blurred as more and more succumbed to the irresistible urge to dance. Even those who tried to resist found themselves drawn into the madness. Whispers of curses and demonic possessions spread like wildfire through the city. Superstition and fear took hold, and people began to believe that they were being punished by some malevolent force. People were afraid to leave their homes, terrified of being infected by this strange dancing mania. Doors were bolted, windows shuttered, and the once bustling town became eerily silent. The authorities, caught completely off guard, struggled to comprehend the situation, let alone control it. They tried various remedies, from prayer to exorcism, but nothing seemed to work. The city of Strasbourg, once a vibrant hub of trade and culture, was now in the throes of an unprecedented epidemic, an epidemic of dance. The once thriving community was brought to its knees by a force that no one could understand or control. Faced with an utterly baffling crisis, the city authorities turned to the most respected figures of the time, the physicians. These were men who were considered the ultimate authorities on health and wellness, the ones who held the keys to understanding the human body and its ailments. However, the medical practitioners of the 16th century were ill-equipped to deal with such a bizarre phenomenon. Their knowledge was limited, and their methods were often based on superstition and rudimentary science. They'd never encountered anything like the dancing plague before. They diagnosed the dancing plague as a natural illness caused by an imbalance of bodily humors, specifically hot blood. This theory was rooted in the ancient belief that the body was governed by four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. An excess of hot blood, they believed, led to feverish and uncontrollable movements. Their prescribed solution was as shocking as the affliction itself: more dancing. They thought that by encouraging the afflicted to continue dancing, they could somehow expel the excess heat from their bodies and restore balance. Instead of trying to stop the dancing, the authorities, acting on the advice of the physicians, decided to encourage it. They believed that this was the best course of action, trusting in the expertise of the medical community. They believed that the afflicted needed to dance the disease out of their system. This idea, while seemingly absurd to modern sensibilities, was taken very seriously at the time. A stage was erected, musicians were hired, and professional dancers were brought in to keep the afflicted moving. The authorities spared no expense in their efforts to facilitate this unusual treatment. Guild halls and a grain market were opened up to accommodate the ever-growing number of dancers. These spaces, usually reserved for trade and commerce, were transformed into makeshift dance halls. The authorities truly believed they were doing the right thing, providing an outlet for this strange energy they believed was plaguing their citizens. They saw it as a way to channel the uncontrollable movements into something that could be managed and eventually cured. The situation, however, only worsened. The more the afflicted danced, the more their condition deteriorated. The constant dancing, far from alleviating the symptoms, seemed to exacerbate them. The dancers became more exhausted, more delirious, and more desperate. The music, the crowds, the relentless pressure to keep moving, it all added to the sensory overload, pushing the dancers further into a state of delirium. The atmosphere was charged with a frenetic energy that seemed to feed on itself, creating a vicious cycle. The authorities, in their misguided attempt to cure the plague, had inadvertently fueled the flames, transforming a public health crisis into a macabre spectacle. What started as a desperate attempt to heal had turned into a tragic and chaotic scene with no end in sight. What began as a bizarre spectacle took a dark turn as days turned into weeks. The initial curiosity and amusement of the townsfolk quickly turned into horror and disbelief. The relentless dancing took a severe toll on the participants. Their bodies, pushed to the brink, began to show signs of extreme fatigue and distress. Many collapsed from sheer exhaustion, their bodies ravaged by dehydration and lack of sleep. The once lively dancers were now mere shadows of their former selves, their energy completely drained. Their faces, contorted in a mixture of pain and ecstasy, painted a grim picture of the ordeal they were enduring. The expressions told a story of suffering and torment, a stark contrast to the initial joy of the dance. The streets, once alive with the frenetic energy of the dance, were now littered with the collapsed bodies of the exhausted and the dying. The scene was chaotic, with bodies lying motionless, creating a grim and somber atmosphere. The stench of sweat, urine and feces permeated the air as basic hygiene became impossible for the dancers. The once clean and vibrant streets were now filled with the foul odor of human suffering. Their bodies, pushed beyond their limits, began to fail. Muscles tore, joints gave out, and the human body, not designed for such relentless activity, began to break down. Heart attacks, strokes, and seizures became commonplace. The physical toll was immense, and the human body could only endure so much before succumbing to the strain. The city, once vibrant and bustling, was now shrouded in a pall of fear and death. The lively atmosphere had been replaced by a somber and eerie silence as the reality of the situation set in. The music, once intended to heal, now seemed to mock the suffering of the dancers. The melodies that were supposed to bring joy and relief now only added to the irony of the tragic scene. The initial amusement had long since evaporated, replaced by a chilling realization: this was not a harmless spectacle. The crowd's expressions changed from curiosity to horror as the severity of the situation became apparent. It was a deadly epidemic, claiming the lives of its victims through sheer exhaustion and bodily failure. The dancers, once full of life, were now succumbing to the relentless demands of the dance. The authorities, realizing the error of their ways, desperately sought alternative solutions as the death toll continued to rise. They brainstormed day and night, trying to find a way to stop the madness and save the remaining dancers. The dancing plague, once a bizarre curiosity, had morphed into a terrifying reaper, claiming its victims one delirious dance at a time. The dancers, lost in their delirium, were unaware of the deadly consequences, creating a chilling and haunting atmosphere.